Caleb Hurst was 12 years old. He was alone on a mountain trail in Tennessee when he heard something that didn't belong in those woods. Not an animal, not wind, boots, moving fast, and something heavier, carried through the brush like whoever was holding it had stopped caring about the noise. For 19 hours and 4 minutes, Caleb tracked a man through 11.3 miles of mountain wilderness. Alone. Injured. Without food, through a night that dropped to 41 degrees and didn't apologize for a single minute of it. Before any police unit responded. Before any helicopter swept its light across the ridge. Before any adult even knew which direction to look. A 12-year-old Boy Scout from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, was already on the trail. And what 150 Hells Angels did when they found out. The way they rode before sunrise. The mountain they climbed in the dark, guided by trail markers a child had built alone. The corridor they formed in a parking lot at dawn. Is the kind of story that reminds you what people are made of when they decide to show up completely. This is that story. Before we go further, hit that subscribe button to ride with the Gentle Biker official family. We bring you real stories of brotherhood, unexpected heroes, and the people who show up when it matters most. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Small town or big city? Living room couch, TV screen, or phone in your hand at midnight? We want to know. Now, September 6th. Great Smoky Mountains, Tennessee. Caleb Hurst was 12 years old. He gave away his water at 2 in the afternoon and went without until 4 in the morning. He gave away his trail bar at 2 and went without food until sunrise. He gave away the jacket off his back and walked through a 41-degree mountain night in a scout shirt because he had already made a decision. 7 words, written in pencil in a field journal. I am not leaving without her. When was the last time you kept a promise that cost you something you hadn't planned to give? When was the last time you stayed, when everything said leave, when your body said stop, and you stayed anyway? This is the story of a boy who stayed, and the brotherhood that rode through the dark to honor him for it. Friday morning, September 6th. Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee, 6:47 a.m. The mountain air at that hour tastes like cold water and pine resin and something older than both, the particular smell of Appalachian forest in early September, when the mornings have started reminding you that none of this lasts. Caleb Hurst was crouched beside a creek bed on the Cucumber Gap Trail, sketching a raccoon footprint in the wet silt. He was small for 12, quiet in the way that certain kids are quiet, not shy, just paying attention. His scoutmaster Frank Older had been saying since Caleb was 8 that the boy noticed things grown adults walked past without seeing. Frank said it the way you say something true that you're still surprised by. Frank had dropped him at the trailhead at dawn. Solo wilderness observation. 4 hours. 12 species of animal sign. Documented and time-stamped. Then back. No exceptions. Trust what you see, Frank had told him before driving off. Those were Caleb's grandfather's words. Frank had known Henry Hurst for 30 years and still used the man's words because some words are simply better than the ones you can make yourself. Henry Hurst had been dead 18 months. Lung cancer, the fast kind. Caleb had been at the hospital when the machines went quiet. He had sat in the hallway afterward for an hour holding the leather cord with both hands. He had put it on his wrist. He had not taken it off since. 3 wooden beads, carved from a white oak branch behind the house in Gatlinburg. 1 bead per rule. Henry had pressed them into Caleb's palm on a September afternoon when Caleb was 8 years old. Both of them on the back porch in the last of the summer light. The old man's hand still certain then, still steady. Observe. Be patient. Trust what you see. Not rules for the woods, Henry had said. Rules for wherever you find yourself. By 6:47 a.m., Caleb had documented 8 species. He was finishing the raccoon sketch, 4 toe pads, heel pad slightly wider on the left. The hand-like impression that always looked to him more deliberate than accidental when he heard the boots, heavy, fast, moving northeast through rhododendron thicket so dense there was no path, unless you had been here before and memorized every step. He looked up slowly. His grandfather had taught him, fast movement draws eyes, slow movement disappears. Through a canopy gap, 180 feet down slope, he saw the man. 6 feet tall, dark jacket, heavy across the shoulders, moving with the pace of someone following a route they had walked in their mind many times before walking it with their feet. He was carrying something over his left arm, something red. Swaying with each stride in the heavy, boneless way of a sleeping child, or a child holding herself absolutely still. A little girl, dark hair in braids, red zip-up hoodie, not moving. Caleb touched the first bead on his cord. Observe. He gave it the full attention his grandfather had meant by the word. Not a glance, not a confirmation of what he'd already decided. A real and complete inventory of what was actually in front of him. Adult male, 6 feet or more. Heavy set. Dark jacket, left boot. Worn outer heel, leather cracked from years of carrying weight on the outside edge. Moving northeast with destination purpose. Carrying a child, female, approximately 9 to 10 years old. Dark braided hair, red hoodie. Chest movement confirmed. Alive, completely still. The stillness of fear-based compliance, not sleep. He touched the second bead. Be patient. He watched for 90 full seconds. He looked for anything innocent. A father carrying a sick child to a trailhead. A ranger transporting a lost child to safety. There was no trailhead in that direction. There was no road for 11 miles. There was no reason in the world for a grown man to be carrying a limp child through off-trail rhododendron at 6:47 in the morning with the bearing of someone following a memorized route. He touched the third bead. Trust what you see. What he saw. This was wrong. Not maybe wrong. Not possibly wrong. Wrong, fully, completely, and without a reasonable alternative explanation. Caleb closed his journal, capped his pencil, put both in his cargo pocket, and followed. He didn't calculate odds. He didn't weigh the options. He didn't think about the 4 hours Frank had given him, or the 8 species he still needed, or the water bottle meant to last until the trailhead. He moved low and parallel to the man's line of travel, stepping on roots and rocks where he could, avoiding the leaf litter that crackles. Slow. The forest not reacting. At 6:51 a.m., he stopped at a birch trunk and wrote his first journal entry. Time-stamped. Specific. Boot print description. Direction of travel. The child, red hoodie, dark braided hair, approximately 9 to 10 years old, alive, still. He read it back once. Then he added one more line at the bottom. Pressed the pencil hard enough to leave an impression through to the next page. I am not leaving without her. 7 words. He zipped the journal into his cargo pocket and kept moving. 2 miles away, Marcus Stone Kellerman was running back from the camp store. Site 47, Elkmont Campground. His daughter Emma was 9 years old. Dark hair in braids, always one braid looser than the other, the same way her mother Claire had worn hers. Nobody corrected it. That small imperfect braid was one of the ways Emma looked exactly like Claire, and looking exactly like Claire had become something that broke Marcus's heart and kept it beating at the same time. Claire had been gone 14 months, cancer. The fast kind that doesn't give you time to argue. Marcus had been riding with the Tennessee Volunteers chapter for 11 years. He was a quiet man, the way that men who have been through real loss become quiet. Not closed, just careful with words. His brothers understood this without needing it explained. They showed up with food after the funeral. They fixed Emma's bedroom window in August when the wood swelled. They stocked his first aid kit, without making a thing of it. He had planned this camping trip since April, the first future thing he'd looked forward to since the hospital. Emma had circled the date in red marker and drawn a tent and a stick figure with braids that he recognized as herself. He'd asked her to stay at the picnic table. 8 minutes. The table was empty. The granola bar wrapper was folded neat at the corners. Emma always folded things, the way Claire had folded things. The bar was half-eaten, resting on the wrapper like she'd set it down for a moment and intended to come back. She had not come back. Marcus stood there for 3 seconds. Then he ran. At 7:14 a.m., Ranger Patricia Dunn put out the call. Missing child. Female. 9 years old. Red zip-up hoodie. Dark braided hair. Last seen at Site 47, Elkmont Campground. Dunn had 22 years in National Park Service search and rescue. She had sat across from parents in this exact moment more times than she wanted to count. She had learned that the most useful thing she could offer in the first seconds of a missing child case was not comfort and not urgency. It was steadiness, a calm voice, and a moving pen. The parent needed to see someone already working. She was already working. By 7:42 a.m., 14 Rangers, 2 K-9 units, and 6 volunteers were in motion. Standard circular expansion grid from Site 47, right forest, wrong direction. At 9:44 a.m., Detective Tom Ware called from Maryville PD with a name. Raymond Greer, Emma's maternal uncle, 44 years old, high school gym teacher in Maryville, youth baseball coach for 6 seasons. Church deacon, no prior record. The kind of man whose neighbors always say the same thing. Wouldn't hurt a fly. He had filed a family court petition for visitation rights 3 months ago. The court had reviewed his claim that Marcus had isolated Emma from her mother's family during Claire's final months, and denied it. Greer had filed an appeal. The appeal was also denied. There was no further legal record of him pursuing the matter through official channels. His phone records showed a campsite reservation at the adjacent loop, booked under a false name, 3 weeks before this exact weekend. Investigators later found, in Greer's abandoned tent, a printed copy of the court's rejection letter. He had read it so many times the fold lines were soft as cloth. He had also packed 3 days of food for 2 people, a propane lantern, a satellite phone, and a handwritten address on a folded piece of paper in his jacket pocket. His sister Doris's home in Knoxville. Already written. Already ready. This had not been an impulsive decision. "He's not in your search grid," Ware told Dunn. "He planned this. 6 years of permits in this park. He knew exactly where your grid wouldn't go." Dunn redirected the K-9 teams northeast at 9:51 a.m. They were getting warmer. They were still 11 miles behind a 12-year-old who had been on the only correct trail since dawn. By noon, Caleb had tracked the man 4.3 miles into the backcountry. He had not been seen. He had not been heard. He moved the way his grandfather had taught him, low and parallel, stepping on roots and rocks, maintaining the distance of patience, close enough to see clearly, far enough to think clearly. He documented everything. Every direction change, every landmark, every boot print. His field journal filled page by page, each entry time-stamped, each one specific enough to matter. At noon, he ate the first of his 2 trail bars. The second one he put in his shirt pocket. Not for himself. At 1:47 p.m., the man stopped at a flat rock outcrop above a creek bend. He set down a pack, dark green, military style, substantial weight. He drank from a water bottle. He gave Emma something to eat, passing it to her 1 piece at a time. Then he swept the ridge with his eyes. A full 180-degree scan, slow and methodical. The scan of someone with experience and something to protect. Caleb was 60 meters uphill, flat behind a fallen hemlock log, breathing through his nose. He used those 3 minutes to update 4 journal entries, check his compass bearing, and eat exactly 4 squares of his remaining trail bar. He watched the man watch the ridge. What he saw: this person was not panicking. He was organized. He had supplies. He had chosen his rest point with care. This was proceeding approximately as planned. And a plan that had gotten this far was a plan that would not stop on its own. At 2:14 p.m., the creek crossing changed everything. The man moved 40 meters ahead to test the ford, walking stick working the water, back fully turned to Emma. Emma stood on the near bank, hands folded at her wrists, eyes on the ground, waiting. Caleb had 30 seconds, maybe less. He moved through the undergrowth to the rhododendron screen, 8 feet from Emma, branches between them. He brought his voice down to what his grandfather called forest voice, sound that carries 18 inches and nowhere else. My name is Caleb. I'm 12. I'm a scout. I've been following you since this morning. I'm not leaving without you. Don't look at me. Don't say anything. Just nod once. Emma went very still, stiller than before. The stillness of a person receiving information they have been waiting for, without knowing they were waiting for it. Then, tiny, precise, invisible from 10 feet away, she nodded. Caleb had his water bottle out before the nod finished. He set it at the base of the rhododendron root where her hand could reach without bending. The last trail bar followed. "Take these," he whispered. "Help is coming. I promise. Do you believe me?" A pause. The man was still working the stick across the creek. She nodded again. Same size. Same precision. Her fingers found the water bottle without looking down, pulled it inside her hoodie in one smooth motion. The trail bar followed. Nothing in her posture changed. If you had been watching from the other bank, you would have seen nothing different about her at all. She was 9 years old, and she was extraordinary. Caleb retreated back into the forest and resumed his bearing. He wrote in his journal, 2:14 p.m. Made contact. She knows. She's waiting. The search teams were working the northeast sector at 2:30 p.m. when they found the false campsite registration in Greer's tent. The K9 units picked up Emma's scent at the campsite perimeter at 3:05 p.m. Moving northeast, the dogs followed the scent trail for 2 miles. Then Greer had crossed a creek, and the trail went cold. The rangers stood at the bank. 11 miles of back country stretched ahead of them. No trail, no road, no way to know which direction Greer had gone on the far side. 2 miles to their north, Caleb Hurst had already crossed that creek. At 3:04 p.m., a wet root caught Caleb's right boot at the angle ankle injuries require. Sudden, specific, unavoidable. The pain traveled up through his leg, and he grabbed a birch trunk and stood absolutely still. His grandfather had taught him to breathe through pain before he'd taught him much else. Don't fight it. It already happened. You can't unfight what already happened. Breathe it in, breathe it out. Make it part of your inventory, and then decide what the inventory means. 60 seconds of breathing. He tested his weight. Bad. The specific combination of instability and deep ache that says grade 2, minimum. The kind a sensible person elevates and stays off for 72 hours. Caleb pulled the elastic bandage from his emergency kit, wrapped the ankle in 4 passes, tucked the end, and stood up. He was 12 years old, and he had a written promise in his journal that he intended to keep, and the ankle was going to have to get in line behind the promise. He kept moving, slower now, more deliberate with the right foot's placement. He noted it in his journal at 3:11 p.m. because the log does not skip inconvenient information. 3:11 p.m. Ankle, right, wrapped, continuing, pace reduced approximately 15%, 1 line, then he kept going. At 3:47 p.m., the man stopped for the last time. Caleb heard the shelter door before he saw it. Old wood swollen in its frame, pushed open with a shoulder. He moved upslope to 60 meters, and through the undergrowth he saw it. An abandoned fire lookout shelter. Stone foundation, 2 rooms, rust-orange corrugated metal roof patched in 3 places. No road, no trail, not on any tourist map. Raymond Greer had known about this shelter before this trip. He had selected it, planned for it, built his entire route around it. This was the end point. Caleb lay in the undergrowth for 8 full minutes, watching the lantern come on inside the window. Then he pulled out his topo map and worked the coordinates 3 times until the answer matched 3 times. 35.612 north, 83.498 west. He wrote it in block letters and underlined it. Then he built the cairns, 7 of them, working in the last of the afternoon light. 1 every 400 meters, back toward the main trail. 3 stones balanced, an orange bandana strip tied to the top stone with a square knot. Each one pointed the same direction, northeast toward the shelter, a thread through the dark for whoever came looking. When the 7th cairn was done, he sat against a chestnut oak and did the math he'd been avoiding. 11.3 miles from the trailhead. Radio range, 3.2 miles. He was 8 miles outside contact range. No cell signal since mile 2. 2 choices. Stay here and stay silent. Know where Emma was and be unable to tell anyone. Or go back far enough to call and trust Emma to wait alone. He sat with both choices for 4 minutes. Timed it. He thought about the nod through the rhododendron screen. How precise it had been. How she had taken the water bottle without looking, without changing her posture, without giving anything away. She could wait. He believed this. He wrote in his journal, "She knows I'm here. She is not alone anymore. I have to backtrack to radio range. I will come back, I promise." He gave Emma his fleece layer before he left, rolled it tight, pushed it through the gap in the shelter's stone foundation at the loose southeast corner. The gap was just wide enough for a 9-year-old's hand to reach. He was walking in his scout shirt and base layer. It was 5:30 p.m. It was 58 degrees. It was going to be 41 degrees by midnight. He started south. The night came fast, and it came cold. By 7 p.m. the temperature had dropped 12 degrees, and the forest had made the transition from amber light to gray half-light, to a darkness so complete that the trees were shapes against deeper shapes. Caleb clicked on his headlamp, red filter lens, his grandfather's, clipped to his scout cap since he was 8 years old. "Red light," Henry had said. "Your eyes keep their night vision, and from 50 feet away in the dark, red light looks like nothing. A trick of the eye. You see without being seen. That's a useful thing to be." He moved south by red light through 41-degree air. Scout shirt, no insulation. Ankle making its opinion known with every step. Writing in his journal every 30 minutes because the log does not skip entries. Each entry got slightly smaller as the night went on. Not only from fatigue, from the cold in his hands, the need to grip the pencil harder, but every entry was there. 8:45 p.m. Ridge crossing, exposed, wind 38 degrees, direct. 11 minutes to cross. Back in tree cover. 10:02 p.m. Ankle significant but functional. Temp dropping. Estimated 4.9 miles to radio range. Continuing, 11:30 p.m. Moving faster to stay warm. Hands cold, but operational. Core, okay. At 10:47 p.m., he heard Raymond Greer's voice. He had drifted closer to the shelter than he'd realized. Exhaustion does that. Softens the precision of navigation. Allows small errors to compound into a larger one. He went flat on the ground in one motion, face in the leaf litter, arms pulled in, profile eliminated. The cold of the mountain earth came through his scout shirt immediately. Total and immediate. He did not move. Greer was standing in the shelter doorway 20 meters below him. Satellite phone. Voice low and conversational. The voice of a man who believed completely that he was alone. "I have her. We're at the old lookout. She's fine. She ate dinner. She's sleeping." A pause. A woman's voice on the other end, too faint to make out the words. "No. Nobody followed us. Nobody's coming. It's 11 miles on no trail." Another pause. The woman's voice longer this time, and the tone of it, even through satellite compression, carried the sound of someone not entirely comfortable. "She's family, Doris. She's with family. That's what Claire would have wanted. Marcus kept her away from us for 14 months. She didn't get to say goodbye to her own mother properly because Marcus decided who got access and who didn't. I'm just correcting that. 2 more days at the shelter. Then we drive to your place. Have the room ready." The phone clicked off. Greer stood in the doorway for 30 full seconds, looking out at the dark mountain. Looking at the exact darkness that Caleb was lying in, 8 inches below his sight line, face in the leaves, heart running hard against the cold earth. One sound, one movement. After 30 seconds, the door closed. Caleb waited 6 full minutes, counted every second. Then he pulled out his journal, and in the red glow of his headlamp he wrote down every word. Both sides, bracketed and labeled. Time noted at the top. He looked at the last line. Nobody's coming. He underlined it twice, hard. The pencil left a groove. He capped it, zipped the journal, and started moving south without stopping again. At 2:14 a.m., he reached the second creek. The water was faster than it had been in the afternoon. Rain somewhere uphill had added to it. Chest deep at the center. Temperature, 53 degrees. He stood on the bank for 2 minutes with his headlamp on the far side, calculating. Going around meant 3/4 of a mile upstream, 40 minutes minimum on this ankle. He thought about Emma, the rolled fleece through the stone gap, the nod through the screen. He stepped into the creek. The cold hit everywhere at once, feet, shins, thighs, and then chest deep, squeezing the breath from him without giving it back. He held his pack over his head, field journal pressed against his chest under his shirt, and waded across in 18 steps. He counted each one. On the far bank, he sat for 3 minutes, timed it. Then he stood and kept moving. He had been awake for 21 hours. No food since noon. No water since he'd given his bottle to Emma at 2:14 p.m. Soaked from the sternum down in 41-degree air. Ankle issuing continuous updates that he had stopped consciously registering and was simply incorporating into each step the way you incorporate a splinter you can't reach. It's there. It's staying. Work around it. He stopped once, at 3:15 a.m., at the base of a tulip poplar. His leg sat him down. His body ran its accounting, and determined that 5 minutes was a negotiation worth having. He sat in the cold dark and pressed the 3 beads on his cord. Observe. Be patient. Trust what you see. He thought about his grandfather's hands, the sawdust smell, the September afternoon on the back porch when everything was ordinary. He thought about Emma's nod, tiny, precise, the nod of a 9-year-old who had decided to trust a stranger's whisper because the alternative was worse. She was waiting. He stood at 3:20 a.m. He kept moving. At 3:40 a.m., Caleb's radio crackled. It was a faint, fragmentary carrier signal, fighting through the dense mountain topography. Caleb stopped walking. He pulled the heavy radio from his belt, his numb fingers struggling with the transmit button. Troop 19 field unit to any Smokies Park service unit. Over. Static. Just the hissing sound of empty air. He tried again. Still static, but with a different texture this time. A rhythmic hum. Someone was on the frequency. He pressed the button a 3rd time, abandoning the formal radio protocol. He just talked into the darkness. My name is Caleb Hurst. I'm 12 years old. I'm a Boy Scout from Gatlinburg, Troop 19. I have been tracking a missing girl named Emma Kellerman since 6:47 yesterday morning. I know where she is. I have documented coordinates. Please respond." Back at the Elkmont Ranger Station, the main radio receiver echoed with the boy's voice. The room instantly froze. Ranger Patricia Dunn stopped writing. Two deputies from Maryville turned around slowly. Detective Ware, who had been pacing near the door, stopped dead in his tracks. For 3 seconds, nobody even breathed. A 12-year-old boy? Out there? Alone? Ranger Dunn grabbed the microphone, her knuckles turning white. Her voice was sharp, cutting straight through the static. "Unit, say your name again and confirm you're in the backcountry. Over." The radio hissed. Then a small, exhausted voice came back, shivering but incredibly steady. "Caleb Hurst, Troop 19. I'm approximately 7 miles northeast of the Cucumber Gap trailhead. I have a field journal with 23 time-stamped entries and coordinates for a structure where Emma Kellerman is being held. Over." Detective Ware stared at the speaker box in sheer disbelief. He looked at Dunn. Dunn pressed the button again. "Caleb, I'm Ranger Dunn. Stay calm. What are the coordinates?" Standing alone in the freezing forest, Caleb opened his journal. The red light of his headlamp illuminated the smudged graphite of his handwriting. He read the numbers out loud, clear and precise. He told her about the rust-colored roof. He told her about the 7 stone cairns he had built, perfectly spaced, pointing right at the target. When he finished, the radio was silent for a long, heavy moment. "Caleb," Dunn said, her voice softer now, filled with a profound sense of awe. "I need you to read me your journal entries." And so he did. For the next 10 minutes, a 12-year-old boy read out the complete timeline of a federal kidnapping. He detailed the creek crossings. He recounted the moment he gave Emma his water. He read the exact transcript of Raymond Greer's satellite phone conversation. When Caleb read his final note, "Nobody's coming," Detective Ware slowly took off his hat and wiped his face. Dunn keyed the mic one last time. "Son, stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Units are on their way to your position." She put the microphone down. She looked at Detective Ware. Ware shook his head slowly. "That kid," he whispered. "That 12-year-old kid just handed us the entire case." "I know," Dunn replied. "Get him out of those woods safe." Dale Axel Briggs had been in the plastic chair next to Marcus Kellerman for 20 hours. He hadn't gone home. He hadn't suggested it. His road captain for 11 years was sitting in that chair and needed someone beside him, and that was the end of the discussion. His phone rang at 4:11 a.m. He listened for 45 seconds without speaking. His face changed the way a face changes when something enormous shifts, not quick, not dramatic. The slow settling of a man receiving information that is larger than a single emotion. He lowered the phone. He looked at Marcus. "They have her location," Axel said. "She's alive, unharmed. They're moving on the position now." Marcus stood up. His legs were unsteady from 20 hours in the chair. He gripped the edge of the table. "There's a boy," Axel said. "A scout. Troop 19, Gatlinburg. He's been tracking Greer since yesterday morning. 19 hours in the backcountry alone. He built trail markers in the dark so the team could follow. He's the reason they have those coordinates." The parking lot beyond the window had 11 motorcycles and 11 of Marcus's brothers standing in the pre-dawn dark. They couldn't hear the conversation through the glass. They watched Marcus's face. That was enough. "How old?" Marcus said. 12. Marcus put both hands over his face. He didn't say anything for a while. Axel picked up his phone and made 3 calls. The first call Aisha was to Ghost. Carter Webb, 47 years old, former Marine, 2 tours, road sergeant of the Tennessee Volunteers chapter. Ghost answered on the first ring, the way former Marines answer phones at 4 in the morning. Already awake, already assessing. Axel told him, The whole story. Emma safe. Scout, 12 years old, 19 hours in the backcountry. Cairns, built in the dark. Creek crossed at 2 in the morning. Ghost was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, "What do you need?" "That boy is coming out of those mountains in a couple hours," Axel said. "And I need brothers on that mountain before he does. I need us there." "Where do I stage?" Ghost said. "Sugarland's command post. And Ghost, take Ridge with you up the slope. If Greer hears the teams coming and runs, I want our people already in the tree line." "Understood," Ghost said. He was dressed and on his bike in 8 minutes. Ghost called 6 members of the chapter's inner circle on the way to the highway. Each of them called 3 more. Within 20 minutes, the Tennessee volunteers were moving, not driving, riding, because there is a difference that everyone in that chapter understood. The second call was to Doc. Bobby Tran, 53 years old. Former Army field medic, 17 years of service. He had retired to Tennessee 8 years ago, with a motorcycle and a medical kit he kept fully stocked because old habits die hard, and some habits are worth keeping. "The boy has an ankle injury," Axel said. "He's been wet and cold since 2 in the morning. He hasn't eaten since noon yesterday. By the time he comes out, he'll have been moving for 24 hours. Dehydration, hypothermia risk, grade 2 ankle minimum," Doc said. "I'll need fluids, heating blankets, full assessment kit." "Can you be at Sugarlands in 40 minutes? 35, Doc said. He was there in 33. The third call was to Hammer. Dale Morrison, 64 years old. Chapter founder. He had started the Tennessee Volunteers in a Knoxville parking lot in 1988 with 6 other riders, and a shared conviction that the road meant something. Axel told him the story. The boy, the 19 hours, the cairns, the creek, the 7 words, written in a scout field journal, "I am not leaving without her." Hammer was quiet for a moment that had weight to it. "How many chapters do we call?" he said. "All of them," Axel said. "Everyone within riding distance." "Give me 10 minutes, Hammer said. And he made the calls. Ray Preacher Hollins was the chapter president of Smoky Ridge out of Asheville, North Carolina. 61 years old, 22 years sober. He had found the road at the same time he found his sobriety, and had long understood that both were the same thing. The decision to keep moving toward what mattered, even when stopping, was easier. His phone rang at 4:23 a.m. He heard the story. "How old?" he said. 12, Hammer said. "We're coming," Preacher said. He called his road captain at 4:24 a.m. His road captain called the chapter. By 4:45 a.m., 51 members of Smoky Ridge were moving. They came down I-40 from Asheville, heading west into Tennessee, headlights cutting through the mountain dark. Single bikes converging at on-ramps, joining the group one by one until the group became something that filled the highway. A sound that carried from one ridgeline to the other, the sound of 51 people who had made a decision and were expressing it at 70 miles an hour on a mountain interstate before sunrise. Independent riders came, too. People monitoring search frequencies. People who knew the Kellerman name. People who had ridden with Marcus at some point on some road and understood, without needing explanation, that you show up for your own. By 5 a.m., 150 motorcycles had converged on US 441 south of the park entrance. 18 pickup trucks, 3 RVs, 2 of them carrying medical supplies and members with first responder certifications who had come ready to work. The sound of them filled the valley. And then they went to work. Ridge arrived at the command post at 4:52 a.m. James Foulds, 39 years old. Former park ranger, 14 years in the Great Smoky Mountains. He pulled up with a laminated topo map and 2 members of Smoky Ridge, and found Detective Ware at the hood of a command vehicle. "I know where that shelter is," Ridge said. He spread the map. I wrote the decommission recommendation for it in 2019. Eastern approach is the right move. Tree cover all the way to the stone foundation. The window faces west. From inside that window, he can't see anyone coming from the east until they're 10 feet from the door. Ware studied the map. Where does he run? Back window, Ridge said. Exits east. 15 meters of open ground before the eastern tree line. He looked at Ghost. If that tree line is covered before he tries to run, there's nowhere to go. Ghost looked at the map. 3 seconds. 6 of us up the eastern slope, in position before first light. I'll guide you, Ridge said. Ware looked at Ghost, made the assessment. Outside the perimeter markers, Ware said. You see movement. You radio it in. You do not engage. We're the walls, Ghost said. You're the door. Ware nodded. Move. Ghost, Ridge, and 4 riders started up the eastern slope at 5 a.m. No flashlights. Ghost had insisted. Light carries further in mountain dark than most people understand. They navigated by feel and by the cairns. Caleb's cairns. Orange bandana strips tied to balanced stones, one every 400 meters, all pointing the same direction. Ghost found the first one at the Cucumber Gap junction and stopped. He crouched beside it, put his hand near the orange bandana strip, looked at the knot, square knot, scout knot, tied by cold hands in the dark, on a hurt ankle after 19 hours in the mountain, tied because a 12-year-old had understood that the people coming behind him would need a thread to follow, and had taken the time to build it. Ghost had tied 100 square knots in the Marine Corps. He recognized this one. He stood up and kept moving. They climbed in the dark, one cairn to the next, following the thread that a child had laid through the Appalachian forest for strangers he'd never met. 7 cairns, not one knocked over by weather or animal or luck, all standing, all pointing, all true. By 5:15 a.m., every exit from the shelter was covered. Ghost on the north, 2 Smoky Ridge members on the south, Ridge and a Tennessee volunteer at the base of the eastern tree line, between the back window and the open ground beyond. 2 rangers on the west trail with Detective Ware. Ghost moved to the position that covered the most ground. He stood in the dark, and he waited. Raymond Greer woke just before the rescue team arrived. Through the thin walls of the cabin, he heard movement on the ridge above. Heavy boots stepping with the coordinated, deadly quiet of men who knew exactly what they were doing. He understood immediately what that sound meant. Panic set in. He dragged Emma up, forcing her through the shelter's back window, desperate to lose himself in the dense, pre-dawn woods. He figured he could use the darkness to slip away. He made it exactly 40 meters into the tree line. Greer thought he had the upper hand. But he didn't know he was dealing with men who knew these woods better than he ever could. Ridge, a former park ranger with 11 seasons under his belt in this exact backcountry sector, knew every blind spot, every draw, and every natural exit a desperate man would logically take. Long before the first hint of morning light, Ridge had quietly led 6 riders up the eastern slope. As Greer pushed frantically through the thick brush, the heavy morning fog suddenly parted. A massive shadow blocked the narrow game trail. Then another, and another. Ridge and his 6 riders were already positioned at every single natural exit point. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't yell commands, flex, or hurl threats. They didn't have to. 7 large, weathered men in heavy leather cuts just stood there, rooted to the earth like ancient trees, staring a hole right through him. Imagine the sheer, paralyzing terror Greer felt in that exact moment. The pressure of their silent presence was heavier than any physical blow. It was a complete sentence spoken without a single word. You have nowhere left to run. Greer's knees simply gave out. He let go of Emma's arm and collapsed into the wet leaf litter. He didn't even try to fight. The silent, overwhelming authority of those protectors broke him completely. Law enforcement was there in 4 minutes, and before the sun even cleared the eastern ridge, Raymond Greer's hands were locked behind his back in steel handcuffs. Emma Kellerman walked out on her own feet, red hoodie, right braid coming loose the way it always did. Ranger Dunn crouched in front of her. "Hi, Emma. I'm Patricia. You're safe. Your dad is coming." Emma looked at her steadily. "I know," she said. "Caleb told me people were coming." She was holding something against her side, an olive-green fleece layer, rolled tight, a size too large for her. "This is his," Emma said. "He left it for me when he had to go. I need to give it back." Dunn took the fleece. "I'll make sure he gets it." Emma thought for a moment. "He said he wasn't leaving without me," she said, "but he had to go to call you, so he left the jacket instead." She paused. "I think that was the same as staying." Dunn looked at this 9-year-old in the first light of the Smoky Mountains and thought about the specific quality of the way children understand things when they haven't yet learned to complicate them. "I think that's exactly right," she said. At 6:08 a.m., Doc got the call. Caleb Hurst was coming out at the Sugarlands access road. Hurt ankle, exposure risk, no food since noon the previous day. 24 hours without sleep. Doc had his kit open and his staging position set before the Park Service SUV rounded the last curve. Caleb climbed out of the vehicle. He was in his scout uniform, damp from the creek crossing 9 hours earlier. Red headlamp clipped to his cap, still on. Field journal tucked under his arm, right ankle wrapped, walking with a careful, deliberate hitch that he was working hard to minimize. Doc fell into step beside him without ceremony. "Hey," Doc said. "I'm Doc. Keep moving. Don't stop. You'll seize up if you stop." He produced a protein bar, already unwrapped, and held it out. Caleb took it, ate it in 4 bites. "When did you eat last?" Doc said. "Yesterday noon." Doc's hand moved to the ankle wrap, checking swelling with practiced fingers. "You did this wrap yourself?" "Yes, sir." "It's correct. Who taught you?" "I read the manual twice." Doc looked at him for a moment. "You walked on this for 5 hours after the injury?" "Yes, sir." "That's remarkable," Doc said. "Not recommendable. Remarkable." He kept pace alongside, monitoring the gait, checking color, doing what 17 years in the Army had built into him. "I'm going to do a full assessment in the RV after you walk the path. Core temp, hydration, the ankle properly. Don't argue with me about it." "Yes, sir," Caleb said. The parking lot at Sugarlands Visitor Center was full. 150 motorcycles, 18 pickup trucks, 3 RVs, men and women in leather, standing in the early morning light, facing the road. A path had been left through the center, clean and clear, wide enough for one person to walk. The Park Service SUV stopped. Caleb Hurst climbed out. He was 12 years old. He had been awake for 24 hours. He was in a damp scout uniform, with a headlamp clipped to his cap, and a field journal under his arm, and an ankle that had been arguing with him since 3 in the afternoon of the previous day. He looked at the path. He looked at the people standing on either side of it. He started walking. Nobody spoke. Nobody cheered. 150 people stood in 2 lines and watched him walk between them. The only sounds were engines idling low and his boot on the asphalt, and, somewhere in the tree line above the parking lot, a Carolina wren going about its morning with absolute indifference to human events. Ghost was at the midpoint of the path. He stepped forward as Caleb reached him. "You're Cairns," Ghost said. "We came up the eastern slope in the dark without flashlights. Your cairns led us the whole way, every one of them still standing. Without those cairns, we're 40 minutes slower getting into position. Greer hears us coming early, and he moves before we're set." He paused. "Your cairns closed the exits, before law enforcement, before any of us. You built that in the dark, on a hurt ankle, after 19 hours. That's the work of someone who thinks about the people coming behind them. Ghost stepped back. Caleb kept walking. He was near the end of the path when Marcus Kellerman stepped forward. Marcus was a large man, broad, road-worn, wearing his cut. He had been crying. He had the face of a man who has spent 14 months learning the difference between things worth holding together and things worth letting fall, and he had stopped making the distinction. He crouched down in front of Caleb so they were at eye level. He reached inside his cut and pulled out an olive-green fleece layer, folded neat. "Emma sent this back," he said. "She said to make sure you got it." Caleb took it with both hands. "She told me what you did at 2 in the afternoon," Marcus said, "through the rhododendron. She said you gave her your water and your food and your jacket. She said you told her help was coming and that you weren't leaving without her." He paused. "She said she wasn't scared the whole night. Not once. Because she kept thinking. He said help was coming. And he seemed like someone who kept his promises." He looked at Caleb. "She was right about that, wasn't she?" "Yes, sir," Caleb said. "She was." Marcus put one hand on Caleb's shoulder, one large, road-worn hand, resting there with the weight of something that is more than comfort and less than any word for it. "You saved my daughter," Marcus said. "You stayed for 19 hours in those mountains for a child you'd never met. You gave away everything you had. You walked back out so you could call for help. And then you came back the same way you promised. And when the team went up that mountain in the dark, they followed your cairns the whole way." His voice held. "Thank you. For Emma. For staying. Thank you." Caleb touched the beads on his cord. First bead. Second. Third. He didn't cry. He just nodded. Small. Precise. Complete. The nod of a person who understands the weight of something and is not going to let it fall. At 7:14 a.m., Hammer stepped to the front. The crowd went still. He had that effect without trying. "I've been riding with brothers and sisters for 38 years, Hammer said. "I've seen courage that announced itself with noise and flags, and I've seen courage that went out alone in the dark and never said a word about it until it was over." He paused. 38 years. And I have learned which kind is rarer. The parking lot held its breath. This young man is 12 years old. Yesterday morning at 6:47, he saw something wrong on a mountain trail, and he made a choice. Not a plan. Not a calculation. A choice. He didn't know it would take 19 hours. He didn't know about the ankle, or the creek at 2 in the morning, or the night he'd have to walk through in a scout shirt. He just knew what he'd seen, and he made the only choice he could live with. He looked at Caleb directly. He tracked a man for 11 miles without being seen or heard. He gave away his water, his food, his warmth to a 9-year-old girl through a rhododendron screen, and told her help was coming, and meant it. He rolled his ankle at 3 in the afternoon and walked on it for 5 more hours. He built 7 trail markers in the dark, so brothers he'd never met could climb a mountain and close every exit. He crossed a chest-deep creek at 2 in the morning in 41-degree air because going around took 40 minutes, and Emma didn't have 40 minutes to spare. Hammer stopped. Let it settle. And then he sat down in the leaves at 4 in the morning and read 23 journal entries into a failing radio signal. Because he trusted that what he had done was enough. His voice was the same level throughout. Not rising, not performing, just certain. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. He reached into his jacket. He pulled out a Tennessee Volunteers chapter patch. Not a copy, not a commemoration. The real one. The one members wore on their cuts. The one earned by people who had shown up enough times, in enough ways, to be considered family. "Caleb Hurst," Hammer said, "on behalf of the Tennessee Volunteers, the Smoky Ridge chapter, and every rider who came to this mountain before sunrise this morning, you are one of us. Right now. Today. You have already earned it." He held the patch out. Caleb Hurst stepped forward and took it with both hands. The sound that came from the crowd was not a shout. It was deeper than a shout. The sound of 150 people agreeing with their whole chests. A sound that rose from that parking lot and went into the mountain and came back changed. The way sound comes back changed when the valley it crosses is large enough. Caleb held the patch and looked at it. Then he looked up at Hammer and nodded. Small, precise. The nod of a person who understands the weight of something and is not going to drop it. Raymond Greer was charged with custodial interference, unlawful imprisonment, and child endangerment. The case was clean. The false campsite registration established premeditation. The family court denial 11 weeks earlier established that he had deliberately chosen to act outside legal channels. The satellite phone records confirmed the conversation transcribed in Caleb's field journal. The address of his sister Doris's home, found folded in his jacket pocket at arrest, confirmed that the shelter was not a destination, but a way station on a planned route. Caleb's field journal, 23 entries, time-stamped, with bootprint sketches, compass coordinates with topo cross-reference, and the verbatim phone transcript underlined twice, entered the case as Exhibit 14. Every page was photographed and preserved. The original was returned to Caleb 6 months after the trial concluded, with a note from Detective Ware that read, in its entirety, "You should keep this. It's worth keeping." At sentencing, Judge Carol Breeze looked at Raymond Greer for a long time before she spoke. "You told someone on the phone that night that nobody was coming for that child," she said. "You were wrong." She set her notes down. A 12-year-old Boy Scout was already there. He had been there since 6:47 that morning, the entire time you were walking Emma Kellerman 11 miles into this mountain. He was there when you reached the shelter. He was there when you called your sister and told her nobody was coming. He was 8 inches below your sight line in the dark, lying flat in the leaf litter, writing down every word you said. She looked at him. He was building trail markers in the dark while you slept. A pause. You have argued that your actions were motivated by love for your niece. Consider this comparison. Caleb Hurst, 12 years old, a stranger to Emma before that morning, gave her his water, his food, and the jacket off his back. He walked on an injured ankle for 5 hours in the dark to reach radio range so that she could be found. He built 7 trail markers so that people he had never met could climb a mountain and close every exit before you could move her. He kept his promise. That is what love looks like in practice. What you demonstrated is something else. Raymond Greer received 4 years in state prison. No parole consideration for 2 years. He showed no hebel emotion. In the gallery, Emma Kellerman held her father's hand, and finally, completely, exhaled. 6 months later. Emma Kellerman was in the second row of the fall concert choir at her elementary school in Sevierville, Tennessee. Both braids tight. She'd been practicing them every morning for a week. She wore a green cardigan, and she was mouthing the words before the rehearsal started, running through them one more time. Marcus sat in the bleachers with a gymnasium coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes earlier, and he didn't care about the coffee. He watched his daughter mouth the words of a song, and he thought about the April morning he'd booked that campsite, the first future thing he'd looked forward to since the hospital. He thought about Emma circling the date in red marker, drawing the tent and the stick figure with braids. He thought about the fact that she was here, both braids tight, green cardigan, everything ahead of her. Because a 12-year-old scout had pressed 3 wooden beads on a leather cord and trusted what he saw. Dr. Angie Bloom's 6-month report from LeConte Medical Center. Patient demonstrates full physical recovery. Sleep normalized within 8 weeks. Academic performance strong. Social engagement healthy. When asked in session why she had not been frightened during the incident, the patient said, "He said he promised. He seemed like someone who kept promises. Recovery prognosis. Excellent. On the first Friday of every month, Emma had lunch with Caleb at a diner in Gatlinburg that made biscuits from scratch and kept the coffee coming without being asked. Emma always ordered hot chocolate. Caleb always ordered water. Emma always noted this. "You gave away your water bottle for me," she told him one Friday, turning her cup in both hands. "You should order it more. It's like you're reminding yourself." "I have water," he said, "because I ordered it for you." "Still counts," he said. She grinned and let it go. She was 9 years old, almost 10, and she already understood which arguments were worth finishing and which ones were worth carrying. The Tennessee Volunteers and Smoky Ridge chapters established the Caleb Hurst Tracking Scholarship for Troop 19 the following spring. Full Scout advancement through Eagle Scout. Every badge, every camping trip, every certification fee. Frank Older administered it. Hammer drove from Knoxville for the first ceremony and sat in the front row of Troop 19's meeting hall. He watched 3 teenagers receive their advancement funding. He shook each of their hands. To the last one, a 14-year-old named Darius, who had joined Troop 19 specifically because of Caleb's story, and whose application essay contained one sentence that mattered. "I want to be the kind of person who builds the cairn." Hammer said, "You know why this scholarship exists?" "Because of Caleb," Darius said. "Because of a choice," Hammer said. "Caleb made a choice at 6:47 on a September morning. Everything after that, the 19 hours, the cairns, the creek, the promise he kept, all of it was just what the choice looked like on the outside. The choice came first." He looked at the kid. "You learn to make the choice. The rest follows." 1 year after September 6th, Caleb Hurst stood on the ridge above Cucumber Gap Trail. He was 13 now, Eagle Scout, youngest in Troop 19's history. The mountain was different in September, clear and honest, red maples just beginning to rust at the edges, the creek below running its permanent patient course, a red-tailed hawk working circles above the slope, calling once and then going about its business. Caleb pulled the leather cord from his wrist and held it in his palm. 3 beads, white oak, worn smooth from years of his thumb. He thought about his grandfather's hands, the back porch, the September afternoon when everything was ordinary. He thought about Henry Hurst's voice, slow, as if the words had weight and deserved to be set down carefully. "These aren't rules for the woods, Caleb. They're rules for wherever you are. Observe. Actually look. Don't just confirm what you expect. Be patient. Give things the time they need. Trust what you see. When you know something, down where it's real, trust it. Don't let fear talk you out of what you know." He had been 12 years old, cold and hurt and alone in the dark of these mountains, and he had pressed those beads one at a time, and he had trusted what he knew. He had known Emma was waiting. He had known the cairns would hold. He had known the radio would reach someone if he kept climbing. He had known that 7 words written in a field journal were a promise, and a promise once made was a fact about the world. And the facts had held. He put the cord back on his wrist. The compass in his shirt pocket, the one he'd used to find 35.612 north, 83.498 west, rim worn smooth from his thumb, pressed against his chest. True north, always true north. His grandfather had told him, the compass doesn't get tired of pointing north. It doesn't negotiate. It does the one thing it was made to do, every single time. Some people find out what they were made for in comfort, with time and choice and the luxury of planning. And some people find out at 6:47 in the morning on a mountain trail, when the world goes very quiet and very clear, and the only question left is a simple one. Are you going to stay? Below him, in Sevierville, Tennessee, Emma Kellerman was in the second row of her school choir. both braids tight, green cardigan, mouthing the words before the music started because she wanted to have them exactly right. Her father was in the bleachers, always in the bleachers, and on the first Friday of every month, she and Caleb sat in a booth in Gatlinburg, and she ordered hot chocolate, and he ordered water because she ordered it for him, and they talked about ordinary things. Because the extraordinary thing had already been said, through a rhododendron screen, in a whisper, on a September afternoon in the Appalachian Mountains. I'm not leaving without you. I know. I'll wait. 7 words. And 7 more. That was the whole story. Everything else, the 19 hours, the cairns built in the dark, the creek at 2 in the morning, the 150 riders who came before sunrise, the scholarship, the patch, the path through the parking lot at Sugarland's at dawn. All of it was just what happens when someone means what they say. When someone stays. Because courage doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives at 12 years old, in a scout uniform, in the dark, with 3 wooden beads and a field journal and a decision already made. And brotherhood, real brotherhood, the kind that gets on a motorcycle before sunrise and rides through mountain dark to stand in 2 lines for a kid it's never met. That doesn't announce itself either. It just shows up. That's the whole definition of it. Tell us in the comments. Was there ever a moment in your life when you stayed? When you kept a promise that cost more than you planned? Emma Kellerman needed someone to stay for 19 hours. 1 boy was already there. 150 riders came before sunrise to make sure he didn't walk out alone. Don't be the one who walks past. Be the one who's already there. Be the one who rides before sunrise. Both matter. Both are the story. Both are what we ride for. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button to ride with the Gentle Biker official family. We bring you real stories of brotherhood, unexpected heroes, and the people who show up when it matters most. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from right now? Small town or big city? Living room couch, TV screen, or phone in your hand at midnight? We want to know.